It's time to welcome our first speaker. Joining us for a special one-on-one conversation is Gerald Johnson. Mr. Johnson is the Executive Vice President of Global Manufacturing and Sustainability at General Motors. He received the 2021 Black Engineer of the Year Award for recognizing his advancements in GM's diversity and inclusion programs and COVID-19 responses. We are thrilled to have him joining us today. We will discuss General Motors' forward-looking initiatives and commitment to a cleaner future. We'll also hear about Factory Zero, GM's first fully dedicated electrical vehicle assembly plant. And we will learn about GM's plans to impact the planet's climate with electric vehicles. Here to speak with Mr. Gerald Johnson is Ryan Kennedy, manager of U.S. Black Engineer and IT Magazine. If you have any questions for either Gerald or Ray, there will be a QR code on the screen. Scan it to submit your questions at any time during the conversation.
Sterling, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. We have such an exciting conversation planned for you guys today. You know, our boss, Dr. Tyrone Taborn, pitched this idea of putting together an energy summit. And the first thing that came to my mind was General Motors and Mr. Gerald Johnson. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Johnson won the Black Engineer of the Year Award back in 2001. And I know that was right when GM really started talking about their energy initiatives and their plans for Factory Zero and the plans to go all electric. And so when that opportunity came, I reached out, and I'm really grateful to have Mr. Johnson here. And so I'm excited to get into the conversation.
Hey,
Mr. Johnson, how are you doing?
Hey, good morning, Ray. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks. Looking forward to having some good conversation with you and the STEM City population.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, Mr. Johnson, I know, like I said, back when 2001, you won the Black Engineer Award, and this is really when you guys started to really, start talking about your plans for the future. And since then, you guys have made a lot of revolutionary innovations. And so I want to get right into it and talk about your 000 initiative. Can you tell us about this and how GM came to this idea?
Sure. And first of all, humbled by the recognition of Black Engineer of the Year. But our story at General Motors for electrification began before that, to be honest with you. And we got a long history in working with the technology. But honestly, it was about 5 years prior where we set, not just as an initiative, but as our mission, 000, which is zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. It's a big vision, but it's one that we think as a part of the auto industry and what autos play in the lives of millions in the US and around the world, is that we have an opportunity, quite frankly, to make them safer. And so zero crashes means that we're saving lives, to make them more climate friendly. That's why zero emissions and our commitment in the US by 2035 to be a zero emitting production of vehicles in the US. And then zero congestion, which is a leap forward, but speaks to where we think our autonomous technology can take us in terms of helping people save their most precious commodity, which is time. So 000 is now our mission, not an initiative. It's our mission and reason for being at General Motors, and why we want to apply our technologies and apply them to our industry in new ways to give us new outcomes. So EVs in particular, we launched Factory Zero, fantastic commitment, but Factory Zero, in fact, is not our first foray into EVs. Actually, we have an Orion facility that have been building all EV Bolt EVs and Bolt EUVs for some time now. But what Factory Zero does represent is the first highly automated and introduction of our Ultium platform, which is the battery or electrification platform that we're going to use to build all of our EV production off of. And now that is a shift in technology for sure.
Yes, sir. That sounds very exciting. I really want to kind of dig into the innovations and kind of talk about those cool things. But when you talk about changing and having these plans, that is such I guess, a dramatic, I don't want to say dramatic, such a shift from what we know the auto industry to be. And so that had to be a shift in thought, a shift in mind. When did GM know that, you guys had to be the leaders? When did you know that you wanted to make this focus, and why was that so important to General Motors?
Sure. You're exactly right. The shift is as important, as impactful as moving from horse and buggy to internal combustion engine 100 years ago. And we're at that moment again. And like most shifts in the industry and in the technology, it comes about because there's a point where a new technology hits a sweet spot, a cost point that we think we can deliver to the market, an understanding of the technology so that we know that we can deliver it with reliability and quality, which is really important for General Motors. We not only want to do an all EV future, but we want to do it the right way. So the battery technology and the drive units that come off of that has matured to the point where we think it competes with what offerings we can have in an internal combustion engine. And we think that because of that, the customer, as well as our society overall, because we do believe in the science of climate change, is ready for a commitment like we are to an all EV future. So it's that sweet spot of technology, cost, and we think that we understand how to present that offer and that value to our customers, the millions of customers driving General Motors vehicles today, and the ones that we expect to come along with General Motors in the future. So it's really that sweet spot that we think we're in now. And as we project forward, it's only going to get better as we understand the customer demand and customer need. A little fact, right now, people shopping for new vehicles today, over 50% of them will consider an EV right now today. And of those driving an EV today, 87% of them say they'll never go back to an internal combustion engine. So we know we have legitimate interest. We know that that interest is sustainable because they're not looking to go back to an internal combustion engine. And not only that, we are now also being able to see the workmanship of governments and federal and state that are also committing to help the industry to build the infrastructure that's going to support that demand.
All this sounds amazing. I'm a fan of everything that you guys are doing over there. And like I said, I've picked up when you did your speeches at CES and you really talked about the Hamtramck. And I hope I said that right. It's so kind of a funny spelled word, but so anyway, I hope I got that right. But I really just want to start talking about Factory Zero and the milestone innovations that you guys are making. I know you guys have sustainable manufacturing. You have innovative technology. And so I really want to ask you, how is Factory Zero helping you achieve that 000 mission that you were talking about?
Yeah, thank you. And you did say it right. It is Hamtramck. Well done. But now we call it Factory Zero. And from the time we started the refurbishing of Factory Zero, we were thinking about sustainability and recyclability. So all the concrete, for example, that we had to take out of the old building, we reused all that concrete in different forms and formats so that we didn't create any waste. We put in solar panels and we put in charging stations as well. Factory Zero is tied to all renewable energy sources right now. So from beginning to end, not just what we produce, but how we produce it. Maybe not as recognizable, but as we've talked about 2035 being all EV, we've also talked about in 2025 having all of our facilities on a renewable energy source. And we're on that journey now. And as we speak, we're over 70% of the way there. And so all of our factories and all of our facilities, quite frankly, are going to be run off renewable energy going forward as a part of our commitment to sustainability. But back to Factory Zero. So after the commitment, first of all, was to make it as sustainable as possible, energy sourcing, what we put into the building, the fact that we were using the building itself. So Detroit Hamtramck has a long history in existence, and rather than shuttering a plant and creating an all new, we committed to go in and refurbish an existing plant and save, again, all the materials and all the docks and infrastructure that are already in place there and reuse those as a part of our EV future. We introduced the Ultium platform in our Hummer EV, and we're ramping up our Silverado EV as we speak. And this in the factory enables us to introduce even more technology and automation, from inspection systems, repair systems, validation systems, delivery systems, and automation, and how we move material around the facility. All these things are enabled by the technology that we're placing in Factory Zero, and have already placed, because we are up and running already in Factory Zero. So it's automation at a higher level. It's an EV platform that is going to spread across our entire portfolio. It's sustainably energy supply to it is from sustainable sources, and it in and of itself, it's just one testament to what we can do towards our mission of 000.
Yes, sir. One of the things that when you read about Factory Zero, you talk about sustainable manufacturing and working with the community. And so I was learning about the ESG Pledge. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Our pledge, the ESG Pledge, is not only to take what we're doing, but also then ask our supply base to come along with us. And so we now have almost 70% of our supply base who is committed to come along on this ESG journey with us and has pledged to do it. It is now also looking at all their facilities, both in terms of how they produce and where their energy comes from, their recyclable and non-landfill waste emissions, as well as the recyclability of the products themselves that they're engineering and developing as components for our product and for our vehicle. So the ESG Pledge is our responsibility, quite frankly, to bring all of our stakeholders and partners along with us on this journey.
And that's very important. Mr. Johnson, I want to take a little bit of a pivot in the conversation, because we're talking about a lot of change in process, and typically when there's a large shift in the Industrial Revolution, there are certain demographics, certain communities who are left out, if you will, or kind of an afterthought. And so one thing that I want to ask you is, as a founding member of GM's Inclusive Advisory Board, what is the purpose of this, and really kind of how are we making sure demographics and communities are a part of this shift?
Yeah. Hugely important as a part of our strategy is that we bring everyone along with us. In fact, we talk about everybody in, and we talk about that from various perspectives. Everybody in terms of our own employees being able to go into this all EV future with us, to everybody in terms of communities that may, as you mentioned, may have been left out or may be left out if we're not intentional about how we include them in this all EV future. And so the Inclusion Advisory Board that we put in place is us working with outside constituents, people who think about diversity, people who are engaged in different levels of diversity, people from our community, people from our supply base, all working together to help us sense check our plans around diversity, equity, inclusion, giving us input to and ideas, quite frankly, on how we can make sure we are inclusive in every aspect. And to your point, 87% of people who own EVs charge in their garage at their home. But what if you don't have a garage? And so how do you now prepare for an EV future that's going into multifamily units and more urban environments? And how do you prepare for that and enable that? And so our Inclusion Advisory Board is helping us look at and think about all things inclusion related, whether it's inclusion in terms of our product, inclusion in terms of our EV future and our 000 mission, inclusion in terms of how we bring people into the organization and what diversity and inclusion looks like inside of General Motors to enable everyone to bring their best selves to work, to enable everyone to appreciate and respect the diversity that's already in our organization and the diversity, quite frankly, that we're attracting and bringing into our organization. So the IAB, short for Inclusion Advisory Board, is that team of people, along with myself, Mary Barr, other leaders of General Motors, and those outside community leaders and supply leaders, academics, etc., so that we can all think about this, because we don't pretend to know all the answers. We know that we have a challenge, though, and that if we bring and include the right people in understanding the problem and the challenge of making all EV future for everybody, then we're probably going to find more solutions, more answers than we can come up on our own. And then we can engage with those solutions and or organizations that may already be working on them instead of having to create them for ourselves. So it helps us to think about all things inclusion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I understand that that GM has dedicated about 50 million for climate equity, you know, really putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit about the climate equity plan and how you're you know, committed to, you know, bridging that gap and closing that equity gap?
Absolutely. And let me just start, you know, off your comment off of putting our money where our mouth is. We're already committed over $35 billion into transforming our manufacturing capability, our product capability, and quite frankly, the communities and employees that do the work of engineering and or manufacturing, so they can all be a part of the future. But this particular 50 million for Climate Equity Fund, this was us recognizing again that one, we don't have all the answers. That two, there are elements of climate change and climate equity that affect some communities more than others, again, particularly and specifically urban communities. And we wanted to partner with and put money to partner with organizations that are working on just that issue, that are already stepping up and asking the questions. For example, how do we bring more green spaces into our urban environments to help with their carbon footprint inside of the city? And we're working with, for example, the city of Detroit on a very specific initiative in that regard, as well as our own actions to grow green spaces. And so it's how do we think about it, and how do we work with other organizations who have ideas, may already be in process with those ideas, but may need some help financially or the weight of General Motors' influence to make their next step and next move. And so the Climate Equity Fund is a set aside just for that particular reason, for us to identify and work with other organizations that are fighting climate change along with us.
Mr. Johnson, that was my final question that I have for you. And so I guess before I cut you loose, because I know you're very busy and you probably have a bunch of other things to do, is there anything final, any last words you want to leave the audience with? Because you guys are doing some amazing things. I'm just looking forward to just seeing what the future holds for GM.
Sure. Let me end where we started. 000 is a mission, but it's a mission with a real future attached to it, whether we're talking crashes, emissions, and or congestion, and how we're going to bring those to zero. I want to describe a future for our audience that is very real now. The technology is in our hands, in fact. But the day will come where you will get up in the morning and go out your front door. There'll be a vehicle waiting for you, no driver. That vehicle will take you to your job, drop you off there, and then run out and go do 5-10 other things and come back and pick you up at 5 o'clock in the evening, take you to the grocery store, and then take you home and drop you off, and then go off and do 10 other things overnight before it comes to pick you up again in the morning. That's a real part of the future that we're building. And connecting that with an infrastructure means that we can coordinate that vehicle's routes so that you have less congestion and you can get to your next location quickly and more efficiently. It will be an all EV vehicle, so it'll have zero emissions. And because it has 16 to 18 cameras and radar system, it will be able to see things that you as an operator can't see. True fact, 80% of accidents are operator error. But when you have a computer system monitoring constantly in milliseconds all the activity that's going on around you, you're going to have a safer drive. So zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. The technology is in our hands right now, and we're developing it in a way that's going to be delivered to our customers. Other than that, I'm going to leave you in some very capable hands with Grace, Jessica, and Tammy, where they're going to talk to you a lot more about what we're doing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and all the things that General Motors is involved in that space as well. You're in good hands, Ray, but thanks for the questions.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for having this conversation with me. We hope to see you soon, maybe at Women of Color or Bear in the future. Mr. Johnson, I know you said you brought backup, and so we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to continue the conversation with the rest of the team.
Outstanding, Ray. Thanks. Good talking to you.
Yes, sir. You as well.
At General Motors, we envision a world that is zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. emissions aren't only made by passenger vehicles. And that's why we're implementing our hydrotech fuel cell technology into these hard to decarbonize applications that touch people's lives every day. A hydrogen fuel cell is an electrochemical device. So it takes hydrogen fuel and oxygen from the air, and it combines those two elements to create electricity and water. GM Hydrotech has a land, sea, air strategy in implementing its hydrotech fuel cell technologies in these heavier duty applications. It is critical to find like-minded partners to really kickstart this new technology. Navistar with Class 8 trucks, Liebherr with auxiliary power for planes, and Wabtec for locomotive and transit rail. Hydrotech fuel cells have several competitive advantages. Fuel cells can refuel really quickly, which is an advantage for trucks that require a lot of high uptime. The hydrogen infrastructure supporting fuel cells can be shared and centralized in hubs. Finally, there's not a compromise on payload or performance. GM Hydrotech is on the cusp of commercializing fuel cells. What excites me about working at General Motors is I get to work on this one technology that I'm really passionate about, and that's fuel cell technology and electrification in general.
Welcome back. We are in the middle of the GM panel session here at the STEM City Green Summit. Before we jump into the conversation with the rest of the GM team, I do want to remind you that this is interactive. We're in the metaverse. And so if you want to ask a question, if you want to get a shout out or anything like that, drop a line in the comment. If you're in the metaverse, there's a chat button where you could talk with all the people who are watching us right now. There's also a QR code that you should see in the top corner. If you are not on your phone watching the computer, you scan that code, you can send us questions. And if there's time at the end, we can address them. But first up, I want to, you just saw a commercial about the Altium. And so we have Grace Griffin here, who is GM's plant director. Grace, how you doing this morning?
Hi, nice to meet you. Good.
It's nice. Nice to meet you as well. Grace, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us what your role is at GM?
Yeah, so I'm currently the plant director for our third Altium battery site, which I'll get into in a moment to explain what that technology is. I've been in manufacturing for 23 years in various roles in engineering, as well as my most recent role within our sustainability group. So I'm excited to be here to share, what we call our Altium journey.
Grace, before we jump into our conversation, you actually are a Women of Color Technology All-Star. Am I correct?
Yes. I was honored, I think in 2020.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Very, very exciting. I was telling you earlier that was the first time I believe that you conducted the conference virtually in the metaverse, and just very impressive with what the team put together, and really appreciative of interacting with all of the wonderful other recipients, as well as really what the organization brings, right, to highlight the importance of women of color, in STEM fields.
Yes. Well, we're grateful to have you. And so let's really get into the conversation. We just saw the commercial about the Altium cells, and we talked about the Altium batteries. Can you kind of give us more details? What is it, and how is it helping GM accomplish its missions that we just talked about with Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, so Gerald explained that Altium itself is a flexible vehicle platform, and it's going to allow us to create production of vehicles across many types, right? From a small car to a large SUV to a truck, right? And is our beautiful Hummer truck that we're producing at Factory Zero, which Gerald explained very well. But, the core of that is a battery cell. And so Altium cells, which is the company that I will be working with to make cells that will provide battery packs that provide the platform for the Altium platform that will go into our vehicles is a joint venture that we are entering into with LG Energy Solutions. And so LG brings to the table expertise in terms of the technology, and General Motors brings to the table expertise in terms of manufacturing and our people systems and our safety systems. And so the joint venture that we have actually will allow for us to produce batteries that's going to make EVs more affordable. As Gerald mentioned, we want to have everybody in for every driver. We have 4 sites. So our first site is in Ohio, in Warren, Ohio, and it currently is in actual production of cells. Our second site is about 60% in terms of production ready. In terms of construction, it's Spring Hill. The third site will be the Lansing site, which will be my site in Lansing, Michigan. And we have yet another facility that we haven't announced the location that will give us totaling around 180 gigawatt hours of capacity. So you might ask, well, what does that mean? So for the 3 facilities that we actually have locations for, if you were to imagine 125 kilowatt hours batteries for each vehicles, we would save and reduce enough gasoline for 480 million gallons per year.
Grace, I'm glad you explained that, because when I hear gigawatts and capacity, I'm going to tell you how much of a nerd I am. I'm going to start thinking about Back to the Future.
It's so funny how technology follows cultural trends, because that's probably the first time that any of us, started thinking about autonomous and some of the things that are norm in society now.
Yeah. And pop culture is a huge driver of innovation. When you look at sci-fi and you look at some of the old movies and you see them with tablets and you see them with cell phones,
yes,
and different things like that. So it's always a good driver of innovation. You were just talking about a innovative this Altium, this innovative idea. And so what are some of the technologies that you've applied to the process for the batteries? And how are they sustainable factors that we should be excited about?
I think one thing that I'm most excited about is the manufacturing environment itself. It's a high degree of automation. We have very limited manual handling. When you walk into the facility, it's not cyclic work. So for our employees, it's a completely clean room environment. So think being in a technology field with electronics and that of like a computer environment. In addition to that, we have, automatic pick and place. We have AGVs. So it's a highly automated environment. In addition to that, Gerald alluded to it in terms of our best practices for construction. We are enabling, the facility to be constructed with insulated panels to preserve sustainability and energy and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So, the building walls are insulated. The exterior of the building is completely white. All of that helps our greenhouse gas effects. And so we're really proud of that. And then in addition to that, it's utilizing, as he mentioned, renewable energy. So for instance, in our Ohio facility, we're using wind farm energy in order to provide sustainable energy to the facility in order to run the production processes. I would say too, the other thing that I'm very proud of is that we're working to hire a very diverse population within the workforce. So we're looking to areas of the community that, our goal is not to reemploy individuals that are already within the workforce. We're looking to areas and communities that are underrepresented and our new entry into the workforce. So we have the ability to hire people directly out of high school. We have the ability to go to places where people are re-entering society, maybe after having some experiences in life that, may put them on the margins of society. And then in addition to that, they get to come into this multicultural environment with this diverse workforce because of our partnership with LG, and really just gain, a wealth of experience in this new highly technological manufacturing environment.
Grace, all of this sounds exciting. Like I said, I'm a big fan. I'm always following GM, and so Grace, I want to thank you because that's all the questions that I have. But I do know, like Mr. Johnson said, he brought backup, and you guys came in full force, and so I want to thank you for your time. And I'm going to bring up Miss Jessica James.
Hi, Ray.
Hello, Miss James. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Miss James, what is your role at GM?
Sure. So I'm the senior manager of GM's Climate Equity Fund, as well as our disaster relief efforts. So this is the philanthropic fund that Gerald mentioned that's focused on funding those outside nonprofit organizations that are working at the intersection of climate change, equity, and really innovative programs to bring everybody in.
Well, that's awesome. I know Mr. Johnson covered it, and we talked a little bit about it, but can you give us some more detail about the Equity Fund and really how you plan to use it in the communities and really who's it's targeted for?
Sure. So the Climate Equity Fund, like Gerald mentioned, I'll just reinforce, is really about saying, where are these organizations across the country that are working in communities to advance programs that help those people deal with the consequences of climate change and be prepared for the opportunities that the transition to a more sustainable future will present. And so we look for, again, nonprofit organizations that are working with communities. And I think the best way to talk about it is really to share some examples. And so the Climate Equity Fund has 3 focus areas. The first is sustainable jobs, and that's really looking for adults with barriers to employment or adults that are facing forced transition in the workforce, and helping them gain the skills, certifications, and qualifications for a job in the clean energy sector. The second focus area is sustainable transportation. So that's funding organizations, again, at the community level that are providing increased access to electric vehicles, EV infrastructure, maybe micro mobility solutions, or even public transportation, anything that really reduces the footprint of transportation. And then finally, this pillar of community climate action, which is supporting grassroots community-based organizations that are working to mitigate climate change, help communities adapt, or build resilience. And so those are the 3 things that we look for in organizations that we fund. And just one good example that I think highlights the sustainable transportation category is an organization called Our Car. They're based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they worked with the city of St. Paul to bring in an EV car share program to residents in the city of St. Paul. And they had funding to do this from multiple sources, but GM and the Climate Equity Fund was able to come in with additional dollars to help them reach deeper into the community as they were developing this car share program. So for example, there's a woman in downtown St. Paul who is the president of a local neighborhood association. And so they were able to bring her and several other residents into the conversation in the planning phase and come up with some innovative ways to make this electric vehicle car share program more accessible for the community, and especially more accessible for the people in the community who stood to benefit the most from a car share like program. So one of the features they were able to bring in was changing some of the locations of where the vehicles and the charging stations will sit to make sure it reached beyond just that central downtown location and actually got into the neighborhoods surrounding the downtown area. And then second, they were able to work with the city of St. Paul, the nonprofit, and other groups to come up with an innovative way for customers to pay. And so, for example, if a customer who wants to sign up for this car share program is on government assistance and is considered low income, they would qualify to pay a much lower rate or even to pay nothing to use the the car. Maybe that's to get to a doctor's appointment, maybe it's to get to work or to an interview. And so that was a really innovative way to come up with a model that really brought in equity to an innovative high-tech program like an electric vehicle car share. They also worked on things like making sure those without a regular bank account or a smartphone could actually walk into a city office and prepay and pick up keys in that kind of way. So that's just a really good example of when you're able to bring in additional philanthropic funding, you can really reach into communities and reach a hand out to those that stand to benefit the most from these types of programs.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, reaching back and bringing everybody with you. It's no fun if you get there by yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Ms. James, it's like you was reading my mind because I had these questions that was popping into my head and you were kind of just rolling through. And so is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that we didn't touch on when we talk about the climate equity and your mission in that area?
You know, I would just go back to something that Gerald shared, which is that in addition to the Climate Equity Fund, $50 million toward that work, the company is investing $37 billion with a B into decarbonizing and addressing our own business. And that is so important. It's the biggest piece of the work we stand to do as a company. And so this fund, again, is really stepping back and saying, if we want a future with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion, and we also want to be the most inclusive company in the world, this is a great way for us to reach into communities and work at the intersection of those two goals. And so, you know, you can learn more about the Climate Equity Fund at gm.com and go to the community section, and you can read more about the fund and the opportunities for nonprofits. And so if you volunteer or work with a local nonprofit in your area working on anything I mentioned, I encourage you to go to our website or reach out to me directly and learn more. So thanks again for the time today, Ray.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate your time as well. Jessica, you guys have like a great team that's here. And we have one more GM speaker that we're going to talk to today, and that's Miss Tamberlyn Golden. Good morning.
All right. Good morning.
So Tammy, Tamberlyn, do you prefer if I use Tammy?
Tammy is fine.
That's great. And so you actually are a Women of Color awardee as well. Excuse me, was it not Women of Color? You were a BEA awardee.
Yes, for diversity.
Yes, ma'am. Can you tell me what that award means to you? And then I also want to know what your role is at GM.
Awesome. So receiving that award was very meaningful for me because I live a life through really focusing on this quote that I live by, and that's Martin Luther King, is that it's not about how long you live, but how you live. And so looking to have an impact and to serve to better populations of people, that award aligned clearly with my purpose. It also aligns with the current role that I'm serving in, and that's the Executive Director for Workforce Strategy in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And my team is reimagining the future of work, our talent pathways, and our talent pipeline, and even how we lead to create a more inclusive culture. And I've had more than 30 years with General Motors with depth of experience in manufacturing and engineering of high performance vehicles. And prior to that, I led two of our facilities, the Warren Transmission and Flint Engine operations, which I believe uniquely positioned me for the current role that I'm in, leading with the workforce strategy.
Well, that's awesome. 30 years. Congratulations. It's such a wonderful opportunity to kind of stay with a company for so long and really kind of make an impact. But let's dig in a little bit. And when we're talking about workforce strategy, you know, what are some of the biggest needs that you address at GM? in creating this sustainable workforce that we've been talking about all morning?
Awesome. So as Gerald discussed, we are committed to zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And he painted that beautiful picture of what the future looks like. So as we accelerate into our all-electric future, talent is our greatest need and one of our single most important priorities. And we are looking to attract, develop, and retain and engage the best talent in the world. And we know that that comes from all backgrounds. And so when you look at the work that we're doing, we're looking to build a more diverse and equitable workforce by widening the aperture in terms of how we procure that workforce and tapping into populations of people from all backgrounds. So again, the inclusive team to deliver on this mission, we are really looking to connect people and communities to what matters. And if you look at our facilities are really, really complex areas just filled with opportunity for people to thrive in. And so looking at people being able to join the team and join us on our all electric path is pretty exciting.
Yes, ma'am. And so I was reading that GM is one of the 110 companies focused on reviewing job descriptions to focus on skill versus pedigree. And the goal is to promote 1 million Black individuals without 4-year degrees. How is that working for GM? And can you talk about that a little bit?
So it's really exciting. So 110 was founded by Jenny Remetti, a former CEO of IBM, and Ken Frazier from Merrick. And we are also one of the 110 founding companies. And when we set out on this mission, it was really to ensure that we can really reframe the talent strategy and how our approach to talent. So we are a company that will always value degrees in education. What we want to do, though, is ensure that we have a focus on skills as our priority so that we ensure that we can identify the skills required of a role and not necessarily over-credential a role by considering degree first. So we're in the process of building a skills-first ecosystem here at General Motors. And we work with the 110 Coalition of Companies, which includes over 60 companies who have come together on this mission to reframe that talent strategy, to expand opportunities for individuals to find suitable pathways to employment, and robust opportunities, not just for employment, but for future career growth and development. Because when you think about it as well, as you enter a company like General Motors, you have the opportunity to really set your aspirations and achieve those aspirations. And we have a number of benefits that allow you to do that as well. So one of the first steps in the process is really looking at the roles across the company that when you look at a 4-year degree, we want to make sure that it's not the only acceptable indicator of someone's ability to do the job. So we're committed to the skills first promotional and hiring work so that we ensure that the future of the workforce is very diverse and that all backgrounds are welcome, and that we're looking at what skills are required for a person to succeed in a job. So pretty exciting work. We've done this work, but we're really seeking to enhance and really create some depth by continuing the work of the coalition with 110, as well as with the Business Roundtable. So Mary Barra also chairs the Business Roundtable, which has a similar mission with a focus from a multicultural perspective. But again, it's the right strategy at the right time when you talk about talent.
Real quick before I go on to my next question, say I'm an individual who's looking to take advantage. What ways can I try to apply or join GM? Is there a place on the website or any place that you can direct me to?
Absolutely. So careers.gm.com is your first stop. We ask that you start there, and it'll open up different avenues for you to join, whether it's starting with our track program, our intern program, and again, exploring all the different careers that are offered here at General Motors.
Earlier, when we were talking with Mr. Johnson, he's obviously a founding member of the Inclusion Advisory Board. He talked about it and kind of highlighted. Is there anything that you can add to what he was talking about and how GM is undertaking and becoming the most inclusive company? Is there anything that we can elaborate on?
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting that Mary set a bold vision that we would become the most inclusive company, and in doing that, she stood up the IAB. And the IAB, like Gerald talked about, being comprehensive of not only internal GM leaders, but also external leaders. So we get that external voice into the plans and the thought process we're putting behind this DE&I journey. What I will tell you is that Mary has also supported us reimagining DE&I and what it looks like for the company. And with that, we've been able to really tap into our leaders and how we develop our DEI maturity, ensuring that leaders understand that they create that climate that inspires the culture as well. The work we're doing is really weaving DE&I into the fabric of the organization, because the one thing we cannot do is pursue DEI as an initiative, because it will not be sustainable. It has to be woven into the processes, the business strategy, so that it is here long after all of us leave. And so it's pretty exciting work. I think that General Motors and our CEO has stood behind that vision of becoming the inclusive company. And we will continue to create impactful experiences and positive moments for the entire workforce. And we'll also continue to connect our internal workforce to our external communities and make sure we're having that impact there as well.
Well, Tammy, that's all I have for you. I'm gonna get you off the hot seat. And so thank you. Before I let you go, is there anything that I didn't cover, anything that you want to add, or any final thoughts to leave the audience with?
I'll just leave you with, we appreciate this time to share all that you've heard from General Motors. And hopefully you're leaving with the fact that we're very committed to our all-electric future, as well, reshaping what the company looks like from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. And again, thank you for the time today.
And thank you, Tammy. All right, everyone. Thank you. That concludes the end of this session. I really want to thank Gerald Johnson, Tammy Golden, Grace Griffin, and Jessica James. This has been a really cool segment, and it was a really cool kickoff to the STEM City Green Summit. Our next session starts at 11:30. We look forward to seeing you. Continue to communicate with each other inside the STEM City Universe in the chat section, and be sure if there's time, if the speakers have time, they'll be in the breakout sessions. So there's a link that'll be provided. It's in the STEM City Metaverse. Just click the button that says breakout, and we'll see you here back at 11:30.
Welcome to your future. Welcome to the 2022 Women of Color STEM Conference. Thousands of women from all over the world gather to network, discuss, and celebrate the latest advancements and achievements of industry leaders in STEM, just like you. Join the WOC community from October 6th through 8th as we take over Detroit and the WOC STEM DTX platform for 3 full days. Our network of trusted leaders provide enriching content and stimulating activities that will break you out of your comfort zone and develop your professional potential. No matter how you choose to attend, you won't want to miss this event. Registration is open now. Visit womenofcolor.net to register today.